You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you that today is the last day to enroll in my stress-free class lessons course. The doors are closing tonight at midnight. I've been working on this project for a while, and I am so excited to share with you. If you follow the framework that I'm teaching in this course, you will go from feeling stressed and overwhelmed to feeling confident and prepared as you learn how to schedule, plan, deliver, and assess your classroom counseling lessons. Imagine being able to see every class with ease, regardless of your caseload size. Creating engaging lessons your kiddos will love. Having the ability and confidence to manage classroom behaviors. And having the know-how and tools to measure your lessons' effectiveness. If you're tired of feeling unprepared and overwhelmed and are ready to deliver amazing classroom counseling lessons, this is made for you. Like I said, today is your absolute last chance to enroll. What are you waiting for? Head to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/classlessons to sign up right now. Hey there, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So in today's episode, I want to share with you how I went from stressed to obsessed with classroom counseling lessons, and I want to help you get there as well. So after talking with counselors, I know there's a few key areas that keep coming up and that I keep hearing that counselors want to improve on when it comes to their classroom lessons. So first up, they want to feel more confident and more prepared. Well, I'll tell you how I became more confident and more prepared. I started figuring out the process to prepare. So what I mean by that is instead of just showing up blind to your class lessons and not knowing what you're getting into, there's a few steps you can do beforehand to feel more prepared, thus leading to feeling more confident. And that's determining the location, setup, and frequency of your class lessons. So what does this look like? Well, first, the location. So believe it or not, your class counseling lessons may not take place in the classroom. So they may take place in your office, or they may take place in a common area or like a multi-purpose room or something. So in my experience, about 99% of the time, I was going into the teacher's classroom, right? And that's likely what you'll be doing as well. But if not, you need to know this. So that's why you need to figure out the location of your lessons. Next, figure out the setup of your lessons. So what's it going to look like? What materials will be provided for you, and what materials are you supposed to provide? So technology is a big one to consider. Will you be bringing your laptop to the classrooms? Will you have emailed the teachers something in advance for them to pull up? Will you need to bring special cords or cables or chargers? You never know. And also, this can be the same thing with other materials. So for example, like markers, pencils, crayons, paper, anything you need, craft supplies. Will you be supplying those? Will you be using the ones that they already have in the classroom? Again, these are all things about the setup that you want to find out ahead of time. And the last thing you can do to figure out the process and feel more prepared is figure out the frequency. So determine how often you're going to be teaching your class lessons. So are you in the specials rotation and you'll be assigned a schedule? Or maybe you need to schedule your own class lessons. If so, I recommend doing, one lesson per class a month for about 30 minutes. But maybe your school's expectation is that you go in 2 times a month or once a week. You need to determine the frequency of when you'll be delivering these lessons. So another way that I started feeling more confident and more prepared is that I started getting teacher buy-in. So I wanted the teachers to be on board with me coming into their classroom, and I didn't want them to think like, oh, here comes the counselor, she's taking away from class time, the kids get so distracted. No, instead I wanted them 100% on board. So how did I do this? Well, first off, I started sharing data and stats. So I would share previous data on how my class lessons were successful. And then I would share some stats. So even if it's your first year or you don't have previous data, you can always refer to ASCA and find ways to show how class lessons are beneficial to students or how social emotional learning is beneficial to students. Find some resources online, some research-based articles, and you can present those to your staff and teachers to get them to understand the need for your lessons. And a lot of teachers already know this stuff, right? It's just good to remind them. And I would get teacher buy-in by getting input from the teachers. So instead of just assuming we know what's best and we know what we should be teaching, let's ask them. Let's ask the experts because they're with these kids day in and day out. So you could do this through a needs assessment, like I mentioned in a previous episode, a survey, or by simply just chatting with them in the lounge or in the hallway. Like, hey, what lessons do you want to see this year? What does your class really need? So those are the two things I did to feel more confident and more prepared. I focused on the process to prepare, and I started getting teacher buy-in. Now, the second thing I hear from counselors that they feel like they want to improve is that they're over the last-minute lesson planning. They want to stop planning their lessons last minute right before they go into the classroom. I used to do that as well. In my last episode, I shared a little bit about some mistakes that I made, and that was one of them. So what did I do instead? Well, now I started planning engaging lessons and repurposing content. So like I mentioned a little bit last week, I started planning lessons that the kids were going to love, that were highly engaging, that were interactive, that were student-led. And there's just simply no way you can do that last minute, right? So I had to set some time aside to make sure that I was planning these great lessons. But then I wasn't reinventing the wheel each time, and I wasn't using a different lesson for every single class. I would, lump together some grade levels or slightly modify a few things to use the same lesson across different grade levels. I would also repurpose content in the sense that I would take games or activities I had done in a small group or individual counseling and use that for the whole class as well. So I didn't have to, rush around like, oh, what am I going to do for these guys? Let me Google something. Let me find a video or hop on Pinterest or TPT. No, instead of last minute doing that, I set aside some time to plan some engaging lessons, and then I repurposed that content across different grade levels, so I didn't have to spend as much planning time. Or I would repurpose the content across tiers. So if it was an activity I was using with a tier 3 or tier 2, small group or individual, I would modify it to use it in the class lesson. And sometimes they didn't even need modifying. So those are a couple strategies that I did to help me stop stressing and stop last minute lesson planning. Something else I hear from counselors that they want when it comes to their class lessons is that they want to feel like they're making a difference and that it's actually working. This can be one of the most frustrating things about our profession is unlike an academic exam, you can really assess and say, okay, the student improved. But sometimes with counseling, things are a little more subjective, but they don't have to be. We can start collecting that hard data too, right? So when I wanted to feel like I was making a difference, I started collecting data. Now, this can be as simple as a ticket out the door. They don't even have to write their name on it, and if they're little, they don't even have to write at all. They can just color in a shape indicating a different answer. So this is a way you can assess understanding for the class, and you get a percentage. You don't know exactly who said what, but you're like, oh, it looks like 70% of the class understood that concept. Or if you want to get a little more formal and detailed, you can do a self-assessment. I talk about self-assessments all the time when it comes to group and individual counseling, but this is definitely something you can do with class lessons as well. So send a self-assessment to see how the students have changed since the beginning of the class lesson. Or similarly, you could do a pre-post test. Keep it short, 3 to 5 questions about what they learned during the class lesson. So those are 3 mini data tools that you can use so you can start collecting that data and feel like you're really making a difference now that you can measure the effectiveness of your classroom counseling lessons. Another thing I heard from counselors is that they wanted to feel competent and valued by their colleagues. So like I said before, we want our teachers on board. We want them to think what we're doing is valuable. So how I started doing this was I started writing scripts and I started managing behaviors. So what I mean by script is I had a guide that I would follow to make sure that I was teaching the lesson in a way that was easy to understand and that I was covering all my points. If I went in without a script or without any guide to follow, sometimes I would lose my train of thought, or we wouldn't get through all the activities, or I wouldn't allow enough time for something, or I would simply forget part of the lesson. So having a script to refer to is a great tool. Or if you're doing a digital lesson using like PowerPoint or Google Slides, that presentation can guide you. You have your slides to reference to know what's coming next, right? Oh, right now I'm going to talk about this. Oh, right now I'm going to ask them this discussion question. And like I said, I also started managing behaviors. So behavior management and classroom management is a big piece. And, you want to earn that respect from the teachers and from the students, right? And in order to do so, you need to have some rules in place. So coming up with some rules and expectations, perhaps during the first class lesson to set the stage. And then, observe and collaborate with the teachers. I can't say this enough. I've said it in some previous episodes. They're the experts. Observe them, see the teaching style that you like, what you don't like, and then you can make your own and then collaborate with them and find out what works best for their class and how you can integrate that into your classroom management strategy during your counseling lessons. Okay, guys, I hope you found that helpful. If you want to feel more confident and more prepared, if you want to stop last-minute lesson planning, if you want to feel like you're actually making a difference, and if you want to feel competent and valued by your colleagues, then I really think my Stress-Free Class Lessons course is a great fit for you. Like I said earlier, the doors to Stress-Free Class Lessons close tonight. I want to help you go from feeling stressed to obsessed with class lessons, just like I did. I want you to feel more confident, prepared, and like you're making a difference with your class lessons. If you resonate with any of these feelings or with the experiences I've shared, then Stress-Free Class Lessons is for you. If you have any questions about the program, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, but do so quickly because, like I said, enrollment ends tonight. Are you ready to say yes to improving your classroom counseling lessons and having the best school year yet? If so, then join me and the other counselors who've signed up at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/class lessons. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.